What's going on, guys? Magdallan here. Today I'm happy to bring you my 3.17 Righteous Fire Inquisitor guide. As you saw in the footage before, the Feared is down, the Maven is down, albeit a little bit dirty. I didn't actually know how to do either of those fights. I had only ever previously paid for carries to get through those, and so it took one try on the Feared. I think I died once, and it took me 2 tries on the Maven. I bricked the first set because I didn't understand the bit where the brain comes down and you have to run out to the outside platform. And as somebody with visual disability, the memory game is essentially a that just steals a portal. So, but once I got that figured out on the second try, I got it down. So I would say for basically any normal player, this build is capable of doing basically any content that's available in the game. And so I'm building mine a little bit different than other content creators that I have seen. And so if you are interested in hearing about that and hearing about my experience of league starting the character and going all the way up to mid to high level investment in gear, then stick around. Alright, here we are in the Hideout. Now, last time I did one of these guides in 3.16 for my Fireball character, I mentioned that if I did another one of these, I would try and up my game a little bit in terms of being prepared to discuss all of the relevant material. I have done that, so I do have a Word document in the background that's got a little bit of an outline and a few notes, so I should forget less things, and albeit perhaps with a few more little pauses in my speech, I should be able to be a little bit more concise and precise in my language. So, let's begin with a map. We'll do a tier 16 cemetery, cartography, metamorph, random sack frag, and rusted harbinger scarab. We are doing blue influence. I'm going to throw Einhar on the map, harbinger, and a bunch of random scarabs. I don't really care what they are. I just want them to add mobs to the map. And we're just going to cruise through. As you can see, I just kind of bounce around. Everything just kind of melts.
We will be best friends, Beast, until we slaughter you.
It's worth noting, I do not typically do the blue influence. I prefer the red. And in fact, I spent the first, I think, 3 weeks of the league not knowing that those things dropped any kind of fire on the ground, or that that was an issue, or that people felt they were overtuned. Any of that stuff, I was 100% oblivious because the build just stomps on it. And I just literally didn't care about that mechanic, didn't know it existed. Everything was good. Let's cruise in here. First the boss, Ball Righteous Fire. Boss is dead. Before the Righteous Fire, the Ball Righteous Fire ends. I don't know. I assume, you know, you could probably like literally one-shot the boss, but that's about as good as it gets for me. If I can pop my defensive cooldowns and destroy the boss encounter before the cooldowns are over, holy scarabs, then in my book that's a win. I mean, they could have been better scarabs, but I'll take it. I'll take it. And so yeah, the lightning damage is a little spooky, and as you go through the map, clicking on your altars, you never really know, or at least I don't, because I tend not to read the text a whole lot. I don't know exactly what types of negative mods I've got on myself. So for all I know, we could be taking tons and tons more lightning damage, or less res, or oh. Sorry, I'll eat those. I'm gonna go ahead and dodge that weekend. I'll go over the Atlas passives as well. We're done with the map, and the gear, and all of that stuff as well. I have it set up for my optimum fun experience. And as it has turned out, that actually yields pretty good profit as well.
Off you go, little beast.
A little chaos orb. So we just kind of go through the map, and a little extreme in terms of the scarabs. I don't normally get quite that many, but I do get a lot of scarabs. And then you decide for yourself. The clear is pretty good, given how bad the clear was previously for Righteous Fire. For me, it's perfectly fine. I just spent 3 months playing Fireball, where I was clearing entire screens. It destroyed an entire Legion encounter in 2 seconds. That was great. This build, I'm more interested in it being super tanky. It has lots of regen, tons of quality of life, zooms around the map pretty consistently. Those types of things. And I think the clear is perfectly fine. And as we'll talk about, you can certainly ramp up the AoE at the expense of some damage. And that makes it feel a little bit better. So, that's what the build looks like in a map. Now, I will pull up my notes here. So, I guess the first thing that we should talk about is just a general disclaimer. I'm novice to the build. Aside from the, 5 or 6 weeks now at this point that I've played it in this league, I had not previously played Righteous Fire. So the way I started was I looked up a build guide, and the most prominent member of the community that I knew of at the time, and I believe this is still the case, who has played the most Righteous Fire, it has to be Pox, P-O-H-X. I'll put a link in the description to his channel, and you can check out his content. I believe that's all he plays is Righteous Fire, and he streams. So that's basically an invaluable resource that's probably going to be more valuable than I have to say in terms of general knowledge on the build. Another guy is Captain Lance. I know he has done Righteous Fire in the past and also did a Righteous Fire character in this current league. Great resource, great channel. I'll put a link to that one as well. And then the last one is Tenkai, or Tenkai. I'll put a link to him as well. He is currently doing Righteous Fire and has cleared all content and is doing the more popular variant of the build and also throwing in a twist or two of his own that I think is really interesting. And so what's actually different about my version? First off, I wouldn't play this build unless you intend to go to level 100. You need all the points. I have found that to be very liberating. The way I recommend doing that is simply level the character as normal to about 90 to 95, and then just burn some exalts, do some 5-way carries, just get it done. I was amazed at how efficient that was. I will never, again, level in maps or delve from 98 to 99, which is all I had done before. But certainly I had no interest and will never have interest in grinding all the way through level 99 to 100 with the inevitable death at some juncture along that path and the crushing defeat of losing many hours of playtime where you are having to do content that is less juicy, less fun than what you actually want to play because you're trying to protect the XP, yada, yada, yada. That's no good. Nobody likes that. So that's my advice in terms of the leveling. And so most of these other guys are not setting their builds up or presenting them as like you have to be level 100. I would say if you're going to play it the way I'm playing it, that was basically, I had that done, I think, week 2. And so it makes a big difference. Another thing is I'm not doing some of the things that are recommended for the build because they seemed like a pain in the ass and I didn't feel like I needed them. And depending on how you interpret my success rate with clearing endgame content, I was sort of right. So I do not have 90% of any res, but I don't have all res. I'm running 83% fire res. I also don't go out of my way to get a ton of chaos res. I only have the build set up so that when flasks are active, it's just above negative. So, and I think basically outside of mega in-game content, there's a tendency with a build like this to go overboard with the defensiveness. And I think that has a lot to do with it. Most people are not playing their builds for many, many weeks, many hours a day. And so they're not going through necessarily the same process that I do in terms of sticking with the same character for a very long time, learning the ins and outs, not necessarily learning anything more than what they might learn in 2 days. But in terms of my play experience and being able to make each piece of gear work and figuring out, can I just survive this with this much damage, all of those cost and whatever benefit analyses that you do as you're looking at pieces of gear, I didn't come to a point where I felt like, oh man, if I just had that 7% more max fire res, I would be able to what? Continue farming these tier 16 maps that I die once every 7 to 8 hours. Who cares? I'm level 100. That type of thing happened a lot, and so I just went ahead and did things the way that felt the best to me. I took the things that I thought were cool and saw if I could make them work, and it seems like I have. The next thing to discuss is skill choice. So for single target supplementary damage, your choices are Fire Trap, Flame Wall, and Scorching Ray. I used all three fairly extensively with the least experience with Scorching Ray. And my findings were pretty consistent with what I've seen Captain Lance and others say, which is Scorching Ray seems to be the most consistent damage, but it's the most dangerous. Flame Wall is definitely the most AFK. You just kind of put it down and stand there and you're good. You can move a little bit more than with Scorching Ray, but it doesn't do as much damage. And then Fire Trap is by far and away the most damage, but it's kind of clunky. And as Captain Lance said, you don't have the opportunity to take a lot of the quality of life trapper nodes and so on and so forth that you might in other cases. And so you do have to be pretty precise about where you're placing the traps in order for the bosses to trigger them, etc. I haven't found it to be a problem because the build is so tanky that standing there like this for just a few seconds and then you move around a little bit, or you can even just drop a trap and then just keep running around the boss. Just bam, bam, you can just drop a trap. So, let's talk about gear and gem links. Start with the gems. So, for movement skills, everything's going to have life tap, and then I've got your shield charge and faster attacks. In my gloves, I have a portal, which is life tap, then I have my golem, and then flame dash. So you do have 2 movement skills in the build, huge quality of life. You have a slot for a portal, also a big quality of life. And then, of course, the golem is a little bit of damage. I don't know, it dies a lot. I'm not sure if that's the best choice. There might be another gem, or you might try and throw in an enlightened setup to try and work in an additional aura, that type of thing. But again, that's one of those things that I see a lot of people talking about doing and actually doing in their builds, but it just seemed like a pain in the ass to me, and it didn't feel like something I needed to do. In the boots, I have Purity of Elements, Malevolence, Defiance Banner, and Determination, so all of our auras right there. Enduring Cry, Life Tap, Molten Shell, Ball Molten Shell in the shield. The helmet is our Righteous Fire setup. We've got RF, Swift Affliction, Elemental Focus, life tap. And the trap setup. Trap and mine support. There's a fire trap. Elemental focus. Burning damage. Awaken in both of those is very important. And then controlled destruction and your life tap. As far as the gear is concerned, belt's mandatory, but it's super cheap now. In my opinion, unless you're going to get like a Giga Chad +2, or pardon me, +2 is correct. Amulet with fire damage and area damage and frenzy charge and life. Unless you're going to get something really crazy like that, I think this is still your best choice. As you can see, with it well divined and catalyzed, it has some really nice stats on it. And I just haven't felt the need to pass these stats up in favor of using an Ashes or one of the other amulets that you can throw in there. So, weapon, I think I've had this since day 2 or day 3 of the league. Probably pretty expensive now. But essentially those are the types of stats that you want. The attack speed is not mandatory. Gloves are probably the weakest item that I currently have. But that's because I think there's a lot of flexibility in the gloves, and so you kind of can fill in what you need. I think best case scenario, you would probably have maybe Chaos Res and Life Regeneration Rate. Or you would go with one with the implicit for damage over time, and then trying to get a damage over time or crit multi-roll or whatever. Or damage over time multiplier. That type of thing. So there are definitely upgrades in this slot that you can get depending on your resists and all of that. Boots are mandatory as well. Legacy of Fury. I have one that is corrupted with 6% max life and also the ideal enchantment. I was very happy to get these for just an X or 2 early league. They do not have ideal rolls for effective Scorch, nor the chance for the enemies to explode, but I don't care. It's, again, one of those things where is 11% effective Scorch going to make the difference between I'm still enjoying the build or the build feels like shit and so I want to make a new character? I just didn't think that was the case, and so I haven't cared to mess around with it. You could probably get some crazy double corrupted ones. And that may be something I try and do later in the league. Shield I've literally had since I think day 3. Bought it for 1x. And it has served me well. Upgrade would be 3 max fire res, 2 max all res, better life rolls, and something other than fire resistance. Preferably, in my case, lightning resistance. Or you could go with a +1 to fire skills shield with some additional fire damage and some life. That could actually be pretty crazy, depending on what kind of rolls you can get. I've seen a few dudes on the ladder with some crazy ass shields, but I assume they're giga expensive. Even the upgrade I just mentioned with the, 5 total fire res, that's going to set you back a lot. I may buy something like that, but again, it's one of those things where is that 2% more fire res going to make that much of a difference? I've already cleared all the content, so would I be better, to maybe try and go crazy and get an insane scepter that's actually an upgrade, or start thinking about maybe it is time to get the crazy amulet, see how that feels. Could look into double corrupted belts. Could see if I could get my hands on a big pair of gloves, that type of thing. So I'm not 100% sure if the upgrade shield that I mentioned is worth it, but nonetheless, it is what it is. Chest piece is, I think, still attainable with. I think there's still quite a few of them in the market, but I paid quite a bit for this one, and it's going to be tough to get one with that 5% additional physical damage reduction roll. I don't know if any of those are going to be available at all. and the chest piece is just huge. It made such a difference when I put it on the build. And then the Eldritch Implicits that you can get, I think, are pretty crazy. I believe you can swap out that fire damage for 3 max fire res. So if you did that and upgraded from this type of a shield to one that gave you 5 total, I believe I would then be at 88% max fire. And unless there's somewhere else that you can get 1 or 2, maybe you can get it on the gloves. I'm not sure. I think I saw somebody with a +1 to lightning, max lightning on their gloves, but I don't know if you can get max fire. But anyway, I think 88's about the highest you can pick. And so if you're really bossing, maybe that would be the way to go, would be the shield upgrade and then switch out that fire for max fire. Switch the fire damage for max fire res. And then try and grab another +1 or +2 from some other avenue, and then you would be at 90 fire res. I think you get max fire res if you ran Purity of Fire as well, but that's nobody wants to do that. Purity of Elements is king in my book. So, what else do we got? Rings. I'm using a Curse on Hit ring. This one, my buddy picked up off the ground. Is it? So I just crafted damage on it and slapped it on. I don't remember if I divined it or blessed it or whatever, but the crazy ring. That damage recoup is a big deal. And in this slot, mostly this is Frenzy Charge generation. I was just happy to get one that had fire damage and a good life roll. And so I pretty much stuck with it. The cold res is very nice to have as well, and the dex. Dexterity is the bugbear of the build. It's the biggest pain in the ass. It's the thing that holds you back. It gobbles up your points on the tree until you can solve it out. It's kind of a nightmare. The way I solved it was I just spent more money and got stuff that has it on there. Otherwise, you just kind of get pigeonholed into using 1 or 2 points on the tree, which isn't fatal to the build, but again, it speaks to what I talked about earlier, which is if you're level 100 and you have to use 2 points to get 60 dex so that you can equip the gear that you want and clear most or everything in the game and have a great time, that's fine. Being level 95 and having to use 2 points, so you're effectively 93, you have 7 less points than I do, that's going to make a big difference. And then you're going to, if you did exactly everything that I did, but you have 7 less points on your tree, I'm worried that you'll not have the same experience and not be able to as easily diagnose exactly what's going on. So make sure you're level 100, and then everything else can sort of like be figured out. And then we talked about everything except the helmet, which is my most recent acquisition. I believe I paid 50x for it. And the reason I got it at that price is because the life roll is trash. And I believe it's a failed Ashling craft attempt. And so none of that mattered to me because I have plenty of life. And I mean, I've got the extra 6% on the boots that you wouldn't normally have, and so I figured, okay, my last helmet had 80 or 90 life on it. This one has 20, give or take, and I thought it was totally worth it because I slapped this helmet on and it was about a 35% damage increase, and I was using Awaken Increased Area of Effect, which you can see there. I'll swap them back and forth a couple times. So I mean, that's the difference when you have your tree set up the way that I do and you have the cluster jewels that I do. If you don't have the cluster jewels and you don't have enough points to take the AoE on the tree, then it's a little bit more drastic and it would probably feel pretty bad to not have the AoE, in which case you might want a different helmet. But for my purposes, the big deal is trying to get what is effectively a 6 lane. And it was at that point that I wanted to make sure I had that before I made a build guide so that I could experience the build in what I consider to be like a completed state. The helmet that I was using, I have up for sale. And with something like that, you can 100% do everything, especially if you're a better player than I am and you dodge the mechanics. And so I don't get scared away thinking you can't play this build unless you're going to buy a 50x helmet or whatever. This one, I think I paid 14. The market has gone up a little. Well, I hope it's gone up a little bit. I was hoping to get 20 or better, but it looks like I'm probably going to get just a little bit more than what I paid for it, or maybe break even. But something like this will do you just fine for everything that you ever need to do. This, for me, this was like luxury. I wanted to push the damage. But then when you swap out the area of effect for the Awakened Elemental Focus, that was another 30% damage, 25% damage. So between when I was just running around with this helmet and today, my damage is effectively doubled. The tooltip was at like 700k before, and now it's at 1.39 million, and so feels pretty good. Now, just in terms of like how much damage am I doing? Assuming that I have set up everything correctly in POE, my understanding is that the build is doing, in just a regular map, about 7.5 to 8 million. If you're fighting Shaper, Guardians, or whatever, then you're doing like 6.5 to 7. And if you're fighting Cirrus, then you're doing like 5.5 with my current gear. With the old helmet, I think you would have been doing closer to like 3.5 million on Cirrus. So I trashed him with no issue in much shittier gear much earlier in the league. So I don't know how much that matters. For me, 90% of the time I'm doing maps or maybe Shaper Guardians or something like that. And so I think it's pretty easy to hit that 4.5 to 5 million DPS barrier where I think things start to feel really good. And then with a couple upgrades, some gem changes, and whatever, you can easily start to scale that up. My instinct is that if I got an amazing scepter, a huge damage amulet, switched this out for a comparable shield that had damage stats, and replaced any jewel that I'm using right now that's not optimized with one that is, I'm guessing you would be at like 9.5, 10 million DPS on the Shaper Guardians or whatever, maybe like 9 million, 8.5 on Cirrus. That type of situation, probably closer to like 12 million when you're just running around in a map. And I think at that point, it would probably feel pretty crazy. So that is the gear and gem links. Oh, well, let's talk about the flasks, I guess, real fast here. So you want all of them to have the gain X charges. I went with 7, except for this flask, which has 5. And this one, which has 6. But generally speaking, you want the highest roll you can get on that. And then something good as the secondary. Or whatever you need. In my case, some movement speed, attack and cast speed. I'm trying out immunity to corrupted blood because I wanted to use that point for something else on the tree. Because generally speaking, you can just take the immunity to corrupted blood just on the tree because you're already in that area with that mastery when you get your fire res, which we'll go over when we look at the tree. And then here I've got, I think this is probably the most important flask. 3% life regen is nothing to sneeze at. And obviously it's huge damage reduction. And I got one that's got a pretty beastly duration, so good stuff there. And then, some movement speed and some additional armor. In terms of our defenses, when we're just standing here, we're at about 30k armor. We pop our flasks. We go up to about, what's that, 44? Pretty good. We have quite a bit of regen. And if we pop the Enduring Cry, you can see the numbers go up quite a bit more. The regen is pretty awesome with the build. Obviously, if you keep running, you're going to screw up your highest path, and then you lose some of the regen. And so there you can see it will eventually eat my ES, but it's not going to touch the life. So the worst thing that happens is you sort of take away your buffer of ES. So the gear out of the way. Talked about some general upgrades. We talked about the weapon, we talked about the shield and the gloves. The Watcher's Eye that I'm currently using has malevolence damage and damage taken as fire when you're affected by Purity of Elements. I think a better choice would probably be the Chaos Res with Purity of Elements, but that's very expensive to get along with the malevolence damage. But I think that's the way that I'm going to go eventually if I can, scrounge the coin up to do so. And then that's the only upgrade that I have listed here that I didn't already cover. So let's jump into the skill tree and take a look here. Our Ascendancy, Inquisitor, obviously. We're going to take Sanctuary. We're going to take Pious Path. That's what gives us a ton of regen. It gives us the Consecrated Ground when we're standing still, and also for a few seconds when we're running around. Anytime you shield charge, flame dash, attack, do anything, it counts as standing still. So all you do is just run around and shield charge through packs. It curses them and they die and explode because of the boots. We take Augury of Penitence, and then we take Righteous Providence. Zoom out here. Come through here. Take that. Take your area of effect. Some life. There's some regen. Come through here, more life. Here's our first jewel socket. There you can see the types of jewels that I'm using. This is probably the worst jewel that I have. You don't really want one that has the max energy shield. You would much rather swap that out for another damage roll. Come through here, grab Divine Judgment, and then you want this mastery to work along with Master of Fire. But we'll talk about that a little bit more when I get to the cluster jewels. Then you're going to come up here, get Sovereignty, and you need the mana reservation here as well. Life, fire damage, more damage, and this node gives you some awesome damage reduction, makes the Righteous Fire hurt you less. Come down here, Resolute Technique, makes it so our Curse on Hit ring always works with shield charge, so you just smash through packs. Our anointment of choice is Arsonist. Some life. Max Fire Res. Another jewel. Damage. Nope, that's armor and life, sorry. Then we're going to come down here. Call to Arms, Quality of Life for Enduring Cry. We're going to take more life here. Come down here and take this mastery for Aura Effect and these nodes here. And then we're going to come up here and grab Unwavering Stance. Being stunned sucks. Here is another jewel. That one is probably also pretty easily upgradable. You don't really want that mana. You want another damage mod. And then come up here and grab some life. You could also take Divine Shield. I think this is just good in every scenario. I just don't really have any points I want to spend on it, and I just don't feel like I need it. Cluster Jewel. Large, we have Disorienting Display, Cremator, and Smoking Remains. On the small, or pardon me, medium, we have Burning Bright and Master of Fire. This is like an 11, 12x cluster jewel as of today, so another option would be one that has Master of Fire and basically any other decent mod, any other decent notable. And then here is my best jewel. Actually, kind of a crazy jewel. I think I paid like 20x for this a few weeks ago, and so far, no more exist that are for sale. And if they did, I would buy them. And then down here, we have Flow of Life and Student of Decay. Probably you would swap out the Student of Decay for something else if you could get damage, more damage. Or you would just use another cluster like this that has Burning Bright and then something else. But for me, this is a pretty good optimized setup. And then here's our Watcher's Eye. Now, let me think here for just a moment. I want to make sure I'm not leaving out anything important. Oh, yeah, I didn't mention that down here, this is where you get a bunch of the resistance. Some fire and all res, whatever. And then this would be where you would take Corrupted Blood immunity until and unless you have a point available that you don't care about using for this anymore, or you have another solution like on this flask or whatever. Or if you just don't give a fuck, you're just like, yeah, maybe I'll die like once every 5 maps or something to Corrupted Blood. Or you can, you know, mitigate it to some degree with your Pantheon, which I have not even taken the time to upgrade. So right now I'm taking this one, Arakali, and I'm taking this one. Now, let's talk about mapping strategy and Atlas passives. So, map layouts that are super fun for the build. Cemetery, as you saw in the beginning of the video. Beach is really fun. Toxic Sewer. That's not Toxic Sewer. Neither is that. There we go. Toxic Sewer, Waste Pool, very fun. Those small hallways are great, especially if your AoE is a little bit small. A little small, then you can still fill the whole hallway, as they say. Yeah, I think those are the maps that I would recommend. Obviously, City Square is good, but that's just generally good. I don't know that it really is great in terms of this specific build. And so I've just favorited a bunch of Cemetery and a few Toxic Sewer, and that's working out. I recommend Cemetery above all else because you can drop the brother. All right, let's go ahead and look at this. I designed my Atlas passive tree so that I could just run through the map, and I basically only have to click on stuff. I don't want to do any management. I'm not trying to set up expeditions. I don't want to do breach where I have to run in a circle and click hands. I don't want to do any of that shit. So we're going to come up and grab rare monster duplication, maps, shrines, maps, harbinger. Grab all the map nodes, duplication. Come over here, Exarch pack size, which also works for Team Blue. And you don't need this node. That's why we do this little kind of weird thing, because this gives us another map drop duplication node, which is great. Come up here for your scarabs. Excuse me. Over here, these are just nodes that are giving us map drops from bosses. Same deal here. Then here we've got sextants. This is, I can't imagine why you wouldn't take this cluster in every conceivable scenario. And then here is our Eater of Worlds stuff. We don't care about any of these ones because they're just item based. We only care about these. And then here we're doing the same thing, except you probably want to take this point. That's just an error. I must have goofed something up when I was moving some points around. So you want to take that one. Then we're going to take shrines here, harbinger here, Here's a few, just item quantity and rarity. Probably what I would do, just for the moment, is do one of those. And there's the last Harbinger node, if I didn't mention those ones. And, I mean, that's it. And this works great. Shrines are fun. If you got a couple more points... Oh, there we go. There's the point that I missed. If you had more points, you could grab this node, and then I think this cluster would still be worth it. So there, now everything is correct. So, yeah, I mean, that's essentially it. And that allows me to throw in the scarabs that I talked about. You could also, instead of this sack frag, you could throw in divination if you're running cemetery. I did a couple different tests, and, well, I don't know if I want to call them tests. I ran a fuckload of maps, and in less than 50 maps, I dropped a brother. So your mileage may vary, but if you get like one every 50 or 100 maps, still pretty good. 5x is 5x, man. All right, let me check my sheet. I think that's basically all I want to go over. This has been the most fun I've ever had in the game. I have no complaints about the build. It's allowed me to clear content that I was not ever able to clear on any build I played prior. Making currency is really easy because doing maps is fun, and the character doesn't die all the time. And you have lots of tools at your disposal. There's lots of stuff you can fiddle around with and mess around with on the build. So on and so forth. As a last note, I will mention the other variants of the build that are popular. There is the Aegis Aurora melding of the flesh combination. I'm not doing that because I don't want to. I just didn't think it sounded cool. I don't really like the jewels and stuff where it takes a shit all over your resist. Like, that's already a pain in the ass. I don't want to have to use a straight up resist flask. I just didn't want to do any of that. So I'm sure that's very effective. It's a good way to get up to your 90% all res. I'm not shitting on anybody that plays it that way. I just didn't want to. So take that for what you will. And then of course I'm not using the ashes set up for an additional aura or whatever. Again, I feel like if you're going to do that, then you may as well start buying up, level 4 enlightens. Then you're talking about, I mean, those are like, what, 14x or more? I haven't even looked them up, but I'm guessing they're pretty fucking expensive. And so then you're talking about buying those, and then I'm just not into that. So you could do all those things, and the build will perform as good, maybe better, in some cases, than it does now. For me. So that is basically all I want to cover this time around. I'm going to keep playing the build, man. I'm going to get some more upgrades, I think. At the very least, I want to throw some crazier jewels into my tree. And I'd like to maybe upgrade the shield, as I said. And long term, I think probably a really crazy amulet is the way to go, because if you can get your frenzy charges on there along with a bunch of damage, then it opens you up to basically get a really crazy ring in this slot. Maybe one that has a ton of life on it and fire damage and whatever else. Maybe even then go for like minimum endurance charge type situation. A lot of stuff opens up for this ring slot if you're not constrained with wanting frenzy charge generation and minimum frenzy charge, which you do. You want that in the build. So I would like to thank you very much for checking out my guide, and I hope if you decide to make the build yourself that you have as much fun doing so as I have, and that all of your currency dreams come true. I will see you in the next video. Please hit that like and subscribe button, and I appreciate you.